I'd like to thank Nutanix for sponsoring today's episode. Nutanix is a global leader in cloud software and a pioneer in hyper-converged infrastructure solutions, making clouds invisible and freeing customers to focus on their business outcomes. Organizations around the world use Nutanix software to leverage a single platform to manage any app at any location for their hybrid multi-cloud environments. You can learn more at www.nutanix.com. Welcome to Business Brains and the Bottom Line Podcast. My name is Paul Delegro, your host, and my guests today are Chris Laney and Robb Wilcox from Nutanix. Welcome to the show, boys.
Howdy, Paul.
Hey, Paul. Thanks for having us. We're actually big fans here, so honored to be on the podcast today. So thank you.
The check's in the mail, Chris.
Smooth, guys, smooth.
Yeah. So. But no, thanks for coming on. We've been working together for a while here, and we have a lot of discussions on different topics. But really, the things we want to talk about today is you hear a lot of buzzwords in our industry, right? And cloud's probably the biggest one right now, right? Everyone's moving to the cloud, so I always like to get some baseline definitions of what cloud is to you guys. And then we'll work on some other things about hyper-converged and SASE applications and all that. But let's start out with, what is your two definitions of cloud? What is cloud to you?
So I'll jump in. I mean, it's a good question because everybody kind of has their own definition. And you hear about private cloud, public cloud, hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, and now there's actually this term out there that I saw coined recently called super cloud. So we've got that, and that sounds really cool, right?
That's a new one. Yeah. Well, super is always better than just regular. Right?
Yeah, no, it's the best. It's the best.
I'm waiting for mega cloud and ultra cloud. Like, there are levels. I don't think we've seen the final form yet.
Hyper cloud.
So go ahead. I have my feelings on what cloud is, but I want to hear yours, Chris.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, to me and to a lot of the folks that I work with, and again, Robb may have a different perspective on this, but the cloud is really an operating model. So, one that we feel is node-based, software-defined, and provides automation, but ultimately it's a way of going about architecting technology for your business. Look, the reality is IT professionals, specifically operators, are being asked to do superhuman things to provide the business with the best possible outcomes, to drive revenue for the business. And they're doing it with a finite set of resources. I mean, there's a lot of skills gaps out there, but the cloud provides that operational model that can provide that consistency, that on-demand type of feel and automation. And really, to me, that's, if you boil it down, to me, it's about the operating model. Building your private cloud in the same way that the same reasons why you enjoy partnering with the public cloud provider, the hyperscalers. So I'll leave it at that, an operating model.
Yeah. Robb?
Yeah, I'd have to kind of piggyback on that a little bit. I think, especially as an old infrastructure guy, I like my servers. I like to touch hardware. It is where I grew up, right? But it's not a destination; it's a journey. It's a way of doing things, and again, it's a way of deploying and consuming. So I would even add on to what Chris said to say it's a consumption model,
right?
But also it has all these other layers that you can, different deployment methods. Your IaaS, your PaaS, your SaaS. How am I consuming it? How am I paying for said consumption? And then what skills do I need per cloud, whether it's on premise with, again, something like what Nutanix does versus, what you're doing in the public cloud. At the end of the day, it's a common set of skills, a common set of tools.
Right.
I actually went through what I just recently got. The low hanging fruit is the AWS the cloud practitioner or whatever the exam. So I got that one done. And at the end of it, I've been working here 3 years and I've been a customer of Nutanix for longer than that. And it took me that exam to go, holy crap, we have all of this. Maybe not to the same level, but we have all of this because it was built to be a private cloud. So, that journey, it doesn't have to be in somebody else's data center, but it can be. And that's really ultimately what the hyperscaler is somebody else's data center, which is a really big, good one.
Yeah, that's kind of, I'm going to give you my simple version of it. When I think of the cloud, now there's cloud services, right? Backup as a service. We'll touch upon that in a minute. But when I think of cloud, I say to myself, well, because some people might think, well, it's really up there somewhere. It's really, instead of storing data and using your on-prem hardware that you own, you're using someone else's, right? Whether it be Azure, AWS, out there, storing your data, backing up your data, or even using it as a platform in the cloud. Is that that's my simple version of it, because I like to keep things simple. Comments on that?
Yeah, I think that's definitely spot on.
Yeah.
And I think from the end user's lens, I think that's right on the money, because there can be, what we talked about a second ago, a private cloud, which is, that end user, it's really their own, but they just want the same type of the same experience exactly that they would get with the public cloud. So yeah, I think that's right on.
Cool. So another thing that I see is the skills gap is a big one, I think, where companies are struggling with hiring quality people. And the pandemic has not made it any easier, because now people can work remote. So people are getting better jobs, moving around, and a lot of companies just left holes in the bag. And so they're trying to outsource some of these requirements. What are you guys seeing out there? Like me, I work with a lot of customers, as do you guys. What are you guys seeing out there?
There's definitely a skills gap. And, especially when you add the complexity of all of these different things that we just talked about, the private and public cloud. And, that's just, that's the tip of the iceberg. We meet with a lot of customers, and there's all kinds of things going on, their edge sites, their remote sites, just different ways that they're helping the business grow. But at the heart of it all, if you don't have the right resources who can manage across these sometimes disparate environments, you're really caught in a tough position. Yeah. And so, that introduces other new concepts about simplicity and automation that you want to try and get across, that stack.
Yeah, we're getting more and more of our customers coming to us and saying, "Hey, man, we want to offload some of the responsibility here. Can you manage some of these things for us?" Because we have a managed services practice. So that's another thing we're seeing is, again, the skills gap, and just don't have enough bodies to manage it all. So, another avenue I think that we're going down. That's good business for us. It's nice business.
And that's one of the things that we've seen with the the existing, I guess, ecosystem of skills. You've got people who have invested pretty heavily into their their VMware, their SAN, their I'm going to call it, because I work here, legacy skill set. And you're going to this cloud native environment, and then they have to learn something new that is quite different. And then you've got these developers and these younger kids coming up that are using this kind of complete different set of tools. Yeah. And the funny thing is, I kind of see this happening in a few years. Diehard networking became like the standard thing you start your career on. Right. And I can see that actually going backwards a little bit, to where old guys like me are going to be able to come in and clean up some networking stuff, because they're good at deploying things via code, but they don't know how things flow. So I think some things that were more generalized will become more specialized, and things that are currently more specialized will become generalized as those lines begin to blur. And I think seeing the cloud adoption model is going to accelerate that, because each cloud has its own set of tools. Because they offer Kubernetes as a service. Do they deploy it the same way? Do you manipulate it the same way? No, they don't. Yeah.
Well, that was actually kind of leading me to one of my questions is, if you look back even 10 years ago, going to the cloud was so foreign to people, right? And at that time, I'm like, that'll never happen. There's no way. But now 10 years later, we have Microsoft 365, all these, cloud-based applications that we're using. If you were starting a business today, now granted, I'm not saying like a business the size of Toyota. I'm saying if you were starting a business today, would you buy any hardware?
I think some of it's driven by the applications that you're running and where they run best. There's a lot of different factors that kind of go into it. One is legacy applications that maybe are very specific to your business that you can't really get around. They have to run on,
That's a good point. That's a good point. We see some of that too, where it just physically can't.
And latency comes into that. So, depending on where in the world, maybe one of these cloud providers is, also plays a role, and remote sites. I mean, a lot of stuff is at the edge these days.
Yeah.
There's sensor data that's out there that's bigger than it's ever been before. So I think it's almost case by case, and somewhat industry by industry.
Yeah.
At least from what I've seen. I mean, Rob, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I would challenge that it's a workload by workload, data by data decision you have to do. You need to really step back and think of things architecturally. So there is no silver bullet. There is no one play. It's a combination depending on, like, is it something legacy that can't live there? Is there something that I have to have for a governance or compliance reason? Like, there are still reasons to keep it on-prem. So instead of trying to say, I've built this giant environment that can house all my things, you're looking at things and going, okay, I have this very specific use case, this very specific need. I'm going to put it in the right home. But then I need the architecture to be figured out. I need a management plan to help make sense of this. I might need skills from an MSP that can help me orchestrate this. I need an advocate who can help me with that decision-making process.
Yeah.
Well,
and that's without bragging, that's where we come in, right? We help guide our customers.
Absolutely.
I gotcha. Yeah.
Wink, wink.
Where I've seen that work, Paul, is when you have a greenfield environment or a company that's maybe being spun off from another company, and they've got this awesome opportunity to build out an environment the way that they want to do it. And in some of those cases, we've seen them go 100% cloud. And when they say cloud first, or, they really mean all cloud.
Yeah.
And we've seen that work. The only issue then that you kind of run into at that point is, in a lot of cases, you're kind of locked into whatever that model is. And if you, decide 2 years later that, hey, what I did then, I felt like was best for the business, but things have evolved.
Yeah.
Then you're in a little bit more of a precarious situation where you may kind of be stuck in a way, or, you may just have to kind of rethink, what that strategy looks like.
I think most people have a hybrid environment right now, from what I can see. I don't think anyone that I know is 100% cloud or 100% on-prem. Some industries are different, though. Like, some healthcare industries, hospitals, things of that sort. They don't feel comfortable putting anything in the cloud. But I think overall, the hybrid environment is probably going to be here for a while. I think. Who knows? I don't know. Come and see me in 10 years. I'll probably be retired by then. So I don't know. Don't come and see me, but
you got to be curious to see what happens, right?
Yeah. Well, like I said, even 10 years ago, if you said people will be moving to the cloud, I said, there's no way people are going to do that. I just felt like, no, you got to own your data in all your applications, and everything's got to be like right here for me to touch and feel. Now I don't feel that way anymore. And, security is a big issue too, right? I think the cloud is much more secure than it used to be. Not perfect, but I think people are much more comfortable with it.
Well, I think where the security.
Oh, sorry, Chris.
No, sorry about that. I was just going to say that the security thing is really important, because especially in a hybrid cloud scenario where you've got your workloads and applications in different areas, and they're being managed with different tools, and the environments are just different. All of a sudden, when you strived for less complexity, all of a sudden you created more. And you're going to create security holes by having, these different, sets of technologies and clouds that are out there. So that's one thing that we're seeing, and, kind of leads you down that path of, okay, we need some kind of centralized way to manage this all, because we do kind of see that the hybrid cloud environment is here to stay, and multi-cloud environment for some time. So how do we protect ourselves in that scenario?
I've got customers that are in kind of multi stages of that cloud journey, where they are, if it's a 360 for some workloads, they go, oh, we're going to go all in because reasons. And they start that, and they go through the process. They get a refoundation. They got to move things, like it's a slow burn, and they find out it's expensive for that workload. They want to pull it back in. And you've got others that are still kind of, somewhere in that 180 spot. They haven't made it all the way around yet. And everybody's kind of in this spectrum of what makes sense and how do you test it. And what we're finding is a majority of workloads don't fit super well, and they bring them home. And that's either because of management, skill gap, attrition, performance, or, they just, the cost is more than they actually anticipated. So I think the hybrid model, it will be a long-term operate. It's going to be, I think, the way long-term. And it's not to say all in is possible. It's just, it's going to be specific to certain industries.
Yeah, from what I can, see, I think when this whole thing started, when they started with software defined everything, right? They started decoupling hardware and software. You saw it coming then because now they're saying, okay, I can move this to another platform easily. Versus, remember in the old days, it was like you bought an array and those licenses were all tied to that array and you couldn't move them. And if you bought a new array, you couldn't do anything. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? That to me, that's just my simple opinion of when this thing started to roll that direction.
So I was, back in my day, when I was, manager, director kind of stuff and having to architect and deploy this stuff, I was in that world. I've bought plenty of other products to where once that appliance dies, it's gone and I have to rebuy the license all over again. So being able to do things in a general software defined sense that gives me that portability to move the feature to whatever hardware, I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
And that's one
gives
thing
you a lot of flexibility, Rob, right? I mean, that's really one of the keys is like we always say, giving customers options versus having a gun to their head, right?
Yeah, exactly. And, what's nice is even since I became a Nutanix customer, it was still the life of device licensing. So it was appliance based. Granted, the features were very worth it. Yeah. Then we got the capacity-based licensing going to a subscription model to where I can now take that capacity by cores and flash and move it elsewhere.
Yeah, right.
If I wanted to change hardware vendors or upgrade from this to that, it's not tied to the life of that hardware anymore. So I can kind of get forever, evergreen in a sense where I can eject oldest nodes and bring in new ones as long as my capacity remains the same.
Sure. Yeah,
I can do that. Well, now our new licensing model takes it even further and kind of restructured our feature sets into more of a cloud platform. It's literally called Nutanix Cloud Platform. And it's now even easier to do that with more features. And it's now more portable.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, you hit it right on the head, right? We do things in life for two reasons. We gravitate towards pleasure and gravitate away from pain. And if it's something's too painful, they're just not going to do it, right? If it's from a financial pain or just downtime, whatever the pain may be, they're not going to do it. But if you make it, like anything in life, right? If you make it easy for someone, they'll do it.
Yeah, that's really well. And we look at it too from a focus standpoint. New feature releases, evolution of that software. That's what's most important to us. The hardware, there's plenty of hardware providers out there, and they do a great job with it. You may have a preference for one hardware provider, or maybe for whatever reason you get upset with them, or you kind of evolve in your business and you want to use a different one. That shouldn't change the underlying software that's running on top of that. That's really the brains behind the operation. So we kind of look at the hardware as more of it's more of a commodity. The software is really where everything is at.
Completely agree. I mean, now, I mean, we're with this whole software defined environment, you can work on anyone's hardware. Pretty much all guys like yourself. I mean, I don't know how many different hardware platforms you can work on, but I know it's more than one. Yeah. And that's pretty typical. And it gives the customer choice. Like you said, you're not tied into one vendor. And, it's funny, years ago, like we were trained on, you got to sell boxes, right? But it's, I know just from a sales perspective, I know a lot of guys like you out there that work for different manufacturers that they don't even get paid on hardware sales anymore. Yeah. They just get paid on, again, not trying to have you reveal your comp plans here, but I know everyone tells me, well, I don't get paid on hardware anymore anyway.
I do this for free, Paul, just because I love it.
Yeah, so. Well, you and me both. I'm just trying to help. I'm trying to keep Prescriptive alive. I don't care if I make any money either. But it's getting to the point they're trying to de-incent people from pushing hardware.
Yeah. No.
The thing is, at the end of the day, we expect hardware to fail. Hardware is, entropy is real. So yeah. How do you get around that? You plan for it in software. You have a software feature that can make those decisions. And so software define everything eliminates that. And it's kind of one of the other neat things with Nutanix is you've got freedom of hardware, freedom of hypervisor, and freedom of
cloud.
VDI broker. Sorry,
yeah.
For VDI. So again, pick your poison. And now we're extending that further with hybrid cloud. Pick your cloud.
Yeah.
So we're taking our centralized management plane and we're able to talk to kind of everybody, make everybody friends with answering a lot of the skills gap questions, common hypervisor, security, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. And, it's just kind of a neat thing we're seeing where, again, as a customer, I started with node base. I've got X number of license and device nodes to now it lives all over the place.
Yeah.
And I can use these common feature sets to manage all of my things. That's powerful.
Yeah.
And the only time that we really see that customers have a real preference when it comes to hardware, hypervisor, VDI broker, cloud is when, one, the financial model just makes a lot of sense to them, or two, the skills that they have on their team are so specific that they can only really choose one of those.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that just as an industry, we need to evolve beyond, just because, again, going back to the software, if that's really, where the value is, and that's what's, driving all these initiatives in your business, then focus there, focus less on the commodity aspect of, some of these other components. I mean, they're going to be there. They're always going to be there. But give yourself that flexibility. And I think that's something that we're striving to do.
Yeah. So another question for you guys. With the supply chain issue right now, I mean, you guys are actually better than most, by the way. But I mean, you're talking 6 months, 4 months, all these lead times that are just insane. Moving to the cloud, you can do that tomorrow if you want. That's the beauty, the agility of having a cloud option. Just if you need to burst to the cloud or for whatever reason, it's just a lot simpler. Would you agree? What's your take on that?
I mean, I would say it's the beauty of it, but it's also potentially the downfall of some. It is easy, and I think a lot of companies are waking up each morning and saying, "How many workloads am I running in this cloud?" And all of a sudden, the bill is, it's 400 items long, and you're really not sure how it happened.
Well, yeah, we didn't touch on cost yet. So we both know that it doesn't necessarily mean cheaper.
Right.
Both know that. It's usually more expensive in most cases, I would think. But again, you don't have to buy hardware. You don't have to have as many on-prem employees. So there are benefits to that. But
I think that agility is important. And a lot of it too can be, hey, your test dev teams can spin something up real fast. That's great. You have the ability to, have a burstable environment. So, if your business is seasonal or, for whatever that reason might be, there's a lot of flexibility there. So, look, the public cloud in that aspect is very valuable to almost all the customers that we work with.
I want to add a point, and that's, you've got the different operating models, right? When we keep thinking cloud, I think a lot of people default to infrastructure as a service, especially, I've come from a VMware background, like we've all done a lot of that stuff. So you think I'm deploying VMs. But when you've got the PaaS and SaaS offerings, specifically the SaaS offerings, you've got your Office 365, you got SAP hosted, with them or whoever, like you've got all these different consumption models to where people are moving more of their workloads out of that. So the things they do keep on premise are usually the crown jewels, things that matter, legacy.
Mission criticals, yeah.
Right. And so again, you're seeing the overall shape of your environment from, again, a data and application standpoint change. So it's, again, not what can I shoehorn in my environment or my infrastructure. It's where does the application need to live? How is it served? Because it doesn't have to be infrastructure based.
Yeah. So one thing we're seeing on our side, we get to engage with a lot of different vendors out there. And my opinion, the ones that have evolved are the ones that are succeeding. So from a Nutanix standpoint, you guys have been around, 10 years now? How old Nutanix?
It was 2009 or 10.
Yeah. So I know you guys have made a lot of change. I mean, how have you guys evolved to get modern cloud-based agility, all that good stuff?
I think that's a very interesting question. And to answer that, I'll go back with the foundation of what the HCI, the hyperconverged part of the platform, was built on. And that was the same tenets that you were using in the hyperscalers. Our developers, our original founders came from those environments, and they built that type of tool set for the commercial audience. And, that gives them something that's quite powerful. So we kind of have that in our DNA, so to speak, in the way it's built. And then once Nutanix built their own hypervisor, so now we have, AHV built on to where it's a transparent hypervisor, just like in the public cloud. You don't say, what version of this do you have? It's some derivative of KVM, which guess what? That's what AHV basically is. So you've seen that evolution start with those things, and then they started to bolt on various delivery services, database as a service, unified storage with, file and objects, and then, so on and so forth, until you've got this whole, again, this private cloud infrastructure. So watching it grow from an on-premise HCI solution with that core tenant, it just literally grew from a seed into a big ass oak tree. And now we've got all these things that it can do across all these other clouds. It's been interesting to watch. Again, I was a fairly early customer, not super early, but early enough. And, it's not surprising that the journey turned out this way, if that makes sense.
I mean, what are you seeing from a percentage standpoint right now? Like, how many people are still buying on-prem hardware? I mean, it's still pretty high. I mean, we all know that the transition's slow, but are you seeing a change in that, in customers' buying habits?
I mean, I think, there's a lot of different polls out there, in the field. We are seeing that shift. But it is kind of case by case, business by business. In a lot of cases, if what they have in place is working, there's a little bit of a reluctance to change. Unless other factors are coming into play, like financial models, which I know we'll talk about. But I think one of the numbers that I've seen recently from some of the polls that we've done have 83% of our base basically says that, hey, hybrid cloud is the ideal, or hybrid multi-cloud is the ideal environment. And an even higher percentage of those have moved applications from either on-prem or to the cloud within the last year. So almost everybody is taking that step in some form or another. Some are a little bit more aggressive than others, and again, I think there's a lot of factors that go into that. But yeah, I mean, I would say that the evolution and the revolution are here. It's just a matter of now. I think what companies are finding is, okay, now we're taking those steps. Now what does that look like from all these other angles? And and that comes into what we talked about with the skills gap, with being able to manage things and move them around to avoid lock-in, all these other factors that 10 years ago they didn't really think about. I remember working for a partner 10 years ago, much like Prescriptive, and we did what we called cloud readiness assessments. And looking back on those, they were pretty primitive now whenever you kind of compare it to what's actually happening today. But it was a step. Now that a lot of them are there, you're seeing, in some cases the opposite happen, where the term repatriation, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but it's really customers saying, hey, we made that decision to move to the cloud for, this reason or that reason, maybe for this specific workload or more, for whatever reason, and we can talk about those reasons, but it's not working out the way that it was intended, and we're bringing those back. Yeah.
I mean, that actually leads me to my next thing. Now, we don't talk specifics here about customers, but any success stories that you guys want to share with the audience out there of transformations that you've seen that you think would be interesting to talk about?
Rob, I'll let you take that, because I know how successful you've been.
I'm going to try to be not obvious with this one.
Okay. Yeah, we don't want to get sued, Rob.
I don't want to get sued either.
We don't want to reveal our customers either. So
exactly.
This organization, again, I don't even want to talk about what vertical it's in because it's fairly obvious. But this organization was in Azure. They ran all their infrastructure in Azure, and it got to the point where they had a few different data silos. They didn't really have their DR figured out within availability zones. So it kind of was in Azure, but not really getting the full benefit. But it was also really, really expensive for them for what they were doing, and they needed more, and they needed to do things more on premise at their facility. So this sounds terrible, but if I say what it is, it's like, oh, okay, yeah. So I want to be careful. But they had to pull things down into their main facility for on premise, to mostly for speed, performance, agility, cost savings.
Yeah,
a lot of video data. So they wanted to have a lot of that video data to be able to recall quickly. So we pulled it in. And they have a couple different branch sites for, basically, headquarters 2 and headquarters 3 on top of the main facility. So, we've seen a few things like that where they're kind of pulling things in. I'm having a lot of active conversations going the opposite direction too, using our hybrid cloud strategy, where you've got an on-premise Nutanix environment and you're using, it's called NC2 today. So it's our Nutanix cloud clusters. It's a super creative name. I get it. But the idea is deploy Nutanix in bare metal in AWS, or it's public access now, Azure. So GA to come, but public access. And so in those environments, you're able to extend your same management plane and hypervisor plane to each cloud. And this customer is looking at using that functionality for disaster recovery. So they can use basically a pilot light, start with the smallest node type, catch replicas. And when you're ready to fail over, you scale the node type up, go to a bigger instance type, number of instance types, recover, do your failover, everybody's cool, replicate home, it's the main site spread online, go back to your pilot light. So we're seeing those kinds of things here.
That's a good use case right there. Yeah. We see a lot of that too, actually.
But I've got some customers who they've got a straight, we're going all in initiative, and we're like, okay, we're here to help you and support you. And we have some other tools that let you, again, take the concept away from the infrastructure and make it application centric. And now you can use this self-service tool via Blueprint to deploy the application wherever. I can have a web front end with caching in the cloud. I can have a database here on-prem. I can have, assuming networking's in place, right? But I can have all these different things put in place. And so we're seeing customers, again, they're adopting everything, in the commercial space. So it's not like I have any specific wins of a major cloud win. It's different wins of different sizes or different opportunities looking at certain things. For example, I've got one customer who they're just doing a big archive system for a lot of their engineering projects, big engineering firm, pulling all their engineering data into this large cluster, but they want to be able to tier to a cloud storage service. So guess what? Any kind of S3 bucket is great. And so they're using actually a tool called Wasabi, which has some neat features on top of that, on top of the S3 protocol. So they're using, or they're going to be using that functionality for that. So it's a lot of, does the data need to live here? Does it not? I mean, everybody in some sense, just to level set, is using Azure AD or Okta for identity management. They're using some kind of cloud service already that is, we'll call it a cloud native infrastructure service that needs to exist. So I see most people right now, whether they're in the cloud or not, using those functionalities to get ready. And that's all over the place.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. We touched on it earlier about pricing. I'm seeing, pretty much everyone is going to a consumption model where you just pay for what you use. It can scale up, scale down. Talk a little bit about that, what you guys are seeing. Well, let's give a definition of it, what a consumption model is for the people that maybe aren't super familiar with it, and then we'll go from there.
Well, look, I'll just give you an example. We've got some big customers that they would define themselves as project-based. Right. And they may sell a project to another, large organization where they're going to be doing some type of work for them for, it could be a 3-month period, it could be a year, it could be 3 years. And having that flexibility of how they consume technology to them is important. I mean, it helps them not only from being able to control their costs, but being able to be predictable for their customers as well. So that's a big one. And just in general, I mean, the financial models that are out there, this is a big conversation in almost every meeting that I have with customers today. Are they do they want to lean more heavily in on CapEx or OpEx? And a lot of these consumption-based, metered-based models, they're more of an OpEx model, right, which sounds fantastic for a lot of people. But there's a lot of organizations, and I would say that, look, we're in Houston, oil and gas is very big here. In a lot of cases, CapEx is more of, the way that they want to do business. And so, there's a lot of things that you have to work through. There's ways that we can make that happen. But it's a big topic for every single customer that we're working with today who wants to go to that model, but isn't sure if it's going to work within the constraints of the organization that they're in.
Yeah. And to dovetail on that, people are getting away from the licensing model and more the subscription model too. So that's another big change that I've seen.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, it sounds great, and again, it is for a lot of companies. It's predictable in a lot of
Yeah.
ways, but it just depends on what that model looks like for that organization, and how they prefer to basically budget and spend their money.
Well, cool guys. I think I've solved all the world's problems today, and really enjoyed having you guys on. I think we touched on any other words of wisdom that you'd like to share. I mean, you guys are the experts, right? I'm just a pretty face that facilitates these conversations. So, any any other pearls of wisdom you want to share with the audience out there?
I mean, I think as long as whoever's watching, listening, starts to think that the cloud is not an end state, that it's a way of doing things, and it doesn't necessarily mean that on-premise tools and skills are now obsolete. They
Right.
change shape. The line blurred a little bit. But as long as we can showcase that, one, that's possible, and two, Nutanix can help you out. We have solutions to help, because that's literally what Nutanix has turned into, is a hybrid multi-cloud, super cloud, mega ultra cloud.
Yeah, we got to coin a new name, I think, and just like maybe make some money off. We'll figure this out.
That's right. The prescriptive cloud.
Yeah, there you go.
But ultimately, at the end of the day, that's kind of what I'm personally, with a lot of the events I'm running in Houston right now. I'm trying to win hearts and minds, like just get people to think of Nutanix differently and how they consume the cloud differently. Because
no, that's a good point, by the way, Rob. Is that you guys have changed over time, and it's about education, right? Because I know I look at some legacy vendors that are changing, but I still look at them the same way, and I try to have an open mind, but can't teach an old dog new tricks sometimes.
Yeah, and just to echo, what Rob said, I mean, I think it's important that, again, the cloud, whatever that, however we're defining that, it's not a destination. It's a journey, and it's an evolving journey, and it's one where, what's important to the business today and is driving a lot of these decisions that are being made, that may change in a year or 2 years based on a lot of different factors. Maybe another cloud provider that we're not even thinking of today kind of comes out and has a killer application or a better financial model. And, the executives at your organization say, hey, why aren't we looking into this? And if the answer is, well, we're locked into a 5-year contract and we really have no choice, that's where I think, some of these folks are going to start, learning that, hey, we need a little bit more flexible model. Yeah. We need more agility. And again, it's not a destination. It's going to be an ongoing journey. So
yeah, I mean, like anyone, we want to lock our customers up long term, but that may not be the best option for our customers, right?
Yeah.
If they need to be flexible.
If you think about the shape of corporate IT, I say shape a lot in my head today, but you look at the way corporate IT has changed from being, the closet trolls with no lights, and you're in a basement somewhere and you come up and fix something and disappear like that. That's in operating as a cost center is long gone.
Yeah.
If you want to be a competitive business now, you got to be savvy with technology. You have to use things to the best of their abilities. And I think we're in this transitional stage where your infrastructure technology is now allowing that to happen significantly easier, faster. So we go back to the things we talked about, the agility and consumption-based modeling and all these wonderful things. Like, we're watching this go from one transition to another one much more rapidly than we did from client server to virtualization.
Sure.
Like that took some burn, but now it's like cloud adopted.
Yeah.
COVID seemed to just light that on fire, and now we're going full steam ahead. So I think
it comes down to that, the pain pleasure thing, right? If it's easy, people, they're going to do it.
And I don't want to use like the iPhone analogy because I think everybody's beat that horse to death, but here we go. It's the same thing. Like, if Apple got me and they were sneaky about it. I'm anti-Apple. I'm going to Android this. I'm going to Zoom for my music. I'm going to do all this stuff, right? Anti-Apple. And then at the end of the day, I'm like, I have my AirPods in with my Apple Watch, my iPhone, and my Mac at home. And like, shit, they got me.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I think the same operating model, because like you said, it's operating model. It's easy. It makes sense. Things interconnect very well. I mean, there's gotchas, there's caveats, but by and large, when you weigh pros and cons.
Man, I just got a new iPhone the other day, and man, I'll tell you, I had an iPhone 8 and went to the 13. And when you turn on that iPhone 13, it says, oh, do you want to move your data from your old phone? And you go, yes. That's all you got to do. and they it's so, remember the old days, you get a phone, take you 3 weeks to set it up.
Right.
Oh, this is still on that phone. I need to go get that SIM card. And no,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm glad those days are gone.
Unbelievable. I mean, it took just a few minutes to move the data over, and then you activate the phone and you're done.
But to add to that, Paul, your iPhone restored your data from the iCloud.
Right. Exactly right. So it's,
they got
they got me too. I mean, and I don't know about you, but I've got 4 other, my wife and 3 kids were all on the same plan. So it's just easier when you have all the same hardware, because if you got a mix of Android and iPhone, there's some things that are a little clunky when you start sharing stuff between phones. But yeah,
So that brings me to another point. That's just the consumerization of IT in a general sense. We want things, like you said, to be easy and painless and all this. And as we got used to at home consuming tech that's easy, and I was wearing my manager hat and being, I came from being a super tech guy. I would get home and I didn't want to maintain stuff. It's like a mechanic with their own car. Like I don't want to go fix stuff. I fixed it all day long. I want to do anything else. So I got my whole family in Apple, because I don't want to be like, it just works. But it does integrate better with their own ecosystem.
Yeah.
And if you kind of go back toward the cloud operating model, you got a lot of that same ideology. When you look at what Nutanix does in both on-prem and hybrid cloud, same thing. So right. I think that as our old CEO Dheeraj Pandey would say, is that user delight is very important. And so I think it's one thing that the cloud offers in a general sense, and we drive it home.
Yeah. No. So, well, hey guys, thanks so much for being on. So one last thing, if people want to get in touch with you guys or Nutanix, how would they do that?
Well, they can email me certainly directly at chris.laney@nutanix.com. But Rob, you want to provide your information?
Yeah, you can just look me up, Robb with 2 B's on LinkedIn. You'll find my dumb face, or rob@nutanix.com with 2 B's.
Perfect.
I'm on LinkedIn too. I've got a lot of followers, so you want to be on board too.
All right. I think I'm following you, Chris. I'm not sure. And you too, Rob, but so, well, hey guys, thanks again. Really appreciate you guys coming on. And that's a wrap for Business Brains and the Bottom Line. I appreciate everyone listening in.
Thank you.